My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, stories are told of people who survived on the Eucharist alone for a long period of time. It is said of Saint Catherine of Siena that she lived the last years of her life on the Eucharist alone. Her companions and her mother tried to get her to eat, and it only made her more sick, and so they gave up. Saint Catherine of Genoa, it is said, lived on the Eucharist during the season of Lent and Advent. Coming closer to our own times, we have the most scientifically documented case of Blessed Alexandrina da Costa, who is believed to have survived on the Eucharist the last 13 years and 7 months of her life. For Catholics, and indeed for great many Christians, the Eucharist has always been and is one of the most important and vital aspects of their lives. There is a story told of Christians on trial in an early 3rd century persecution of the church in North Africa at Abyssinia. The judges clearly thought that the Christians were out of their minds since they were willing to die for what they believed in. But they showed that they weren't dying for a set of ideas as much as for the Lord Himself when they responded, "But we cannot live without what we do on the Lord's Day." In other words, we cannot live without our weekly celebration of the Eucharist. Ecclesia de Eucharistia, Article 6 says, the Church draws her life from Christ in the Eucharist. By Him she is fed, and by Him she is enlightened. And so, at the conclusion of the apostolic letter, Mane Nobiscum Domine, Pope John Paul II invited all Christians to a more prolonged contemplation of the Eucharist. Never forget, he said, that Jesus in the tabernacle wants you to be at His side, so that He can fill your hearts with the experience of His friendship, which gives meaning and fulfillment to our lives. Mane Nobiscum Domine, paragraph 30. The presence of Jesus in the tabernacle must be a kind of magnetic pole, attracting an ever greater number of souls enamored of Him, ready to wait patiently to hear His voice, and as it were, to sense the beating of His heart. That's what he would say in the same document in paragraph number 18. As Christians, we are called to be with the Lord. There are 2 dimensions to this being with the Lord. In the first place, every disciple is invited to be in the presence of the Eucharistic Lord and to receive His body and blood in the Eucharist. This first form of being with is in view of the second form of being with, or rather results in the second way of being with. The second form of being with is a gradual transformation into the likeness of the one who is contemplated and whose flesh and blood are consumed. Being with in this second sense means being like Christ, having, as St. Paul would say, the same mind of Christ. In the Gospel reading today, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. I am the living bread. Anyone who eats this bread will live forever. The bread that I shall give for the life of the world is my flesh." This is Jesus' way of explaining an important aspect of the Eucharist. Jesus is telling us how through the Eucharist we become one with Him, we are transformed into His likeness. How in the reception of the Eucharist we become what we receive. St. Augustine said, "Behold what you are, become what you receive." When we receive the consecrated host and hold it in our hands, indeed we have the opportunity to behold Him. And later, when we receive Him in communion, the possibility of becoming His body is open to us. Elsewhere, Augustine would say, "I seem to hear your voice," that is, the voice of Jesus from on high. "I am the food of the mature. Grow then, and you will eat me." You will not change me into yourself like bodily food, but you will be changed into me. We read in the Confessions, book 7, chapter 20. In receiving the Eucharist, we enter into a profound communion with Jesus. It is a moment of mutual abiding, as Jesus would invite us to in John chapter 15 verse 4. Abide in me and I in you. Eucharistic communion brings about in us a sublime way the mutual abiding of Christ and each of his followers. The disciples on their way to Emmaus said, "Stay with us, Lord." And this request is granted to them. He not only stayed with them, says Pope Saint John Paul II in Mane Nobiscum Domine 19. But he also found a way of staying in them, thus giving them even more than what they had asked for. The Word became flesh in Bethlehem, house of bread. In the upper room, at the Last Supper, we have the miracle of the bread becoming flesh and flesh becoming bread. In the Eucharistic celebration all over the world, the miracle of the bread becoming flesh continues, leading to yet another miracle that should take place. The miracle where we who receive the body and blood of Christ are gradually being transformed into living bodies of Jesus. Let us pray that we who listen to the life-giving word and receive the life-giving body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist may become more and more Christ-like in our thoughts, words, and deeds. God bless us all.